You've probably been hearing a lot about Project 2025 this election cycle, especially during the Democratic National Convention. During Tuesday night speeches, multiple lawmakers held up an oversized cover of the project's proposal book. Democrats have used Project 2025 as a warning about what might occur if Trump wins a second term. But what is it? Curated by the Heritage Foundation, the 900-page initiative claims to be a, quote, comprehensive guide for the next conservative U.S. president. It offers several different proposals to create a sweeping overhaul of the executive branch. Donald Trump and his campaign are actively distancing themselves from Project 2025, with the former president even calling some of the recommendations, quote, abysmal. However, our CBS News data journalism team went through the project's documents line by line and found more than a third of the 735 proposals were aligned with Trump's past policies and current promises. John Kelly is the vice president of data journalism for CBS News and Stations. He joins us now to talk about the findings. So, John, of those 271 proposals you found that relate to Trump, how many were executive orders and official White House policies?
Right. We compared the language of the proposals in the document against policies that had already been implemented. And about 80 of them were things that were executive orders or rules and regulations within agencies during the first Trump term. Another 21 were that, as well as things that the former president has repeated on the campaign trail, reiterating his support for.
What about your analysis about former Trump administration officials and their connection to Project 2025?
We went back and looked at the work histories for all 38 of the people that are listed as primary authors of the report, including the two leaders of Project 2025. And 28 of those 38 people worked during the Trump administration, during that first term, working everything from senior advisors to agency officials and leaders of large projects.
271 proposals out of 735 are aligned with Trump. Where do the rest of the proposals come from?
There's a combination of things, and it's important to talk about, right? Because the former president is distancing himself from this, saying this is not my report, which is true. It was produced by the Heritage Foundation and some of their allies in the conservative political world. The others are undetermined. Some are things that Trump has specifically opposed, actually. Several abortion restrictions, which are some areas, a ban on TikTok, both things that he has said during this campaign, that he would leave abortion regulation to the states and that he has changed his mind on a ban on TikTok. A lot of the others, because of the language in the document is being vague or very, very detailed in some cases, or, and then trying to match that up to things that Trump has put out in his platform or that his campaign has issued. We wanted to be very conservative there. And so there are a lot of these where there might be some overlap, but we didn't feel like we could deem them as exact matches to his either past actions or future promises. So we wanted to be careful there. Because
you have gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, what else stuck out to you in your reporting?
I think it's interesting, that there has been a lot of conjecture about the report, right, on both sides of the political aisle and a lot of talk about it. And it seemed like regardless of the fact that the former president had said he was not involved, it felt important that the thing that mattered within the document is that it is a policy roadmap. It's a blueprint for an administration. And it felt like the most important thing to do was drill into the actual words. What are the actual things that are being proposed? And how are those things lining up with the very voluminous campaign documents, on Trump's campaign website and the proposals that he's made and the things that he has said at his rallies, and really focusing on those policies is the place. Certainly that number includes some of the standard fare for Republican politicians for decades: reduced taxes, less regulation, reducing the size and spending of government. But a lot of them are the kind of policies that people have been talking about and raising real questions about, related to gender ideology and his pledge to remove protections for racial and ethnic groups and do mass deportations. Some of the things that really got people fired up, those are things that do match up directly with what he's saying in speeches on the trail and what he's done when he was president before.
John Kelly, appreciate your reporting. Thank you.